we love so much to have fun on the show, but we like to talk about things that are going to make your life a lot better, that you live longer with. Do you have high blood pressure, high cholesterol? Maybe you smoke or drink. Well, all of these things can contribute to the possibility that you could have a stroke. And here to talk about reducing your risks and recognizing the symptoms of stroke is Dr. Charles Roman of the Roman Medical Group. Welcome back again.
Thank you for having me.
You always bring those good tips that bring us back to the fact that if we want to have this good life, we need to be healthy.
Well, we do, and prevention is really the key, because especially when you talk about stroke, it's the third leading cause of death in this country. And particularly living here in the Southeast, more strokes occur here in the southeastern United States than any other where in the country.
I'm going to get you to define a stroke, because we talk so much about strokes. What is happening when you tell me I have had a stroke?
That's a great question. Well, there's actually two kinds of strokes. The first kind of stroke, and really the most common kind of stroke, is what we call an ischemic stroke. And what that means is that blood flow is blocked off to a certain part of the brain, typically because a clot has built up in the artery. And when the blood flow is blocked, that part that is deprived of blood starts to die. And if the brain cells die off, then that part of the body that brain controls becomes affected. And that's the most common kind of stroke, about 87%.
Is that a progressive stroke, or does it happen all at once? Does the clot lodge and then a few minutes later you have the attack or the stroke, or does it take time for the brain to die? Do we know?
Well, actually it's a combination of both of them. If you have a clot in the brain that's small and gradually developing over time, certainly like long-standing uncontrolled cholesterol, that will continue to get worse and worse over time, and if that blocks off, of course you can have a stroke from that. But you can have a stroke from a clot that travels. For example, if somebody has an irregular heart rate, we call one of those rates atrial fibrillation. That heart rate, it being irregular, can have little clots develop in the heart, and then as the heart pumps, if that clot goes to the brain and blocks off a part of the brain, the same thing can occur. So ischemic strokes are the most common and really are the ones that we can treat very easily for the most part, as long as we catch them early. Hemorrhagic strokes are the more serious and less common, about 15%, and that occurs when a blood vessel inside of the brain actually bleeds and you bleed into the brain tissue.
How does one know that they are a candidate for a stroke?
Well, stroke is all about prevention, and so certain things make you more likely than not to be at risk for them. So for example, we know that certain nationalities are more likely to be at risk. For example, African Americans are twice as likely to have a stroke than Caucasian Americans. Mexicans and Orientals are somewhere in the middle of there. So certainly certain ethnic races will be at more risk. And then people that have certain medical conditions, such as high blood pressure. Uncontrolled blood pressure can predispose somebody to a stroke. Diabetes, which is really on an epidemic in this country, can lead people to have stroke. So there are certain things, medical and non-medical, that put people at risk for stroke. And it's really treating those things and being proactive that can limit your risk and hopefully prevent that from happening down the road.
When someone comes in and you see that they are likely to have a stroke, and this is for people who are watching who think that if I go in, he's going to restrict my life, I'd rather have a good life than to, you know, people don't want to make changes. What are some of the changes that we would have to make and you still have a great life?
Well, a lot of it is just common sense and doing things that are healthy. In other words, if a person's drinking excessive alcohol, we know that excess alcohol intake can lead to stroke, primarily by creating hypertension. So limiting your alcohol intake can be good. Of course, stopping smoking is always good for you. So stopping smoking. Somebody who gets no exercise, you know, that is sedentary. We want people to get up and walk and get 20 to 30 minutes of exercise 4 or 5 days a week. All of those things are good. But the big thing is many people do not recognize the signs of stroke, and as such, they never go for treatment.
What are the signs?
All right. Here's really important. Stroke typically comes on either suddenly or very quickly. It's not something that kind of evolves over weeks and weeks. It's something that happens relatively quickly. So the things that you would be looking for would be, say, for example, a sudden onset of the worst headache of your life. That would be a medical emergency. You wouldn't even want to call the doctor. You would want to get right to the emergency room because that could potentially be a sign of a bleed inside the brain. Somebody who has sudden onset of numbness or tingling in their face or in their arms or in their legs, or who loses the ability to suddenly use their arms or their legs, their speech becomes slurred. Those kinds of things would lead you to seek out medical attention. Somebody who has a sudden loss of balance, who is walking and then all of a sudden has no equilibrium on their feet, that would be a sign that there is a stroke that could be occurring in a part of the brain that controls your orientation in time and space, and you'd want to get looked at. And the real key is you have about a 3-hour window. So it used to be that when people had a stroke, there was really nothing that we could do for them. But the whole thought process behind stroke and treating stroke has changed. So just like you think of a heart attack and getting to the hospital early to get to the catheter lab so that the cardiologist can open up that artery, now we think of strokes as brain attacks. And so you have a window of opportunity to get treatment. And if you can get treatment within that first 3-hour window, then very often you can prevent the stroke from progressing and hopefully preventing long-term damage. Problem is, people have these symptoms and they say, it's not really happening to me, it's probably not a stroke, I probably just have a little inner ear vertigo, or it'll probably go away, and then they wait, and then a day later or 2 days later they go and seek out medical help and the stroke's already run its course, and at that point you're kind of left with what you have. So knowing what the signs and symptoms are and getting treatment early is very important. So time equals brain.
And again, because we are in an area where there is such a high number of people with diabetes, high blood pressure, and just frankly, very frankly, people who celebrate the weekend with a little bit too much to drink. This is good information in that we want to be there for the grandkids and the rest of the family, that if something is happening, go to the doctor. Tell them where you are, Dr. Roman, and how they can get in touch with you.
Sure. We're at the corner of Warm Springs and Armour Road, and our web address is www.romanmedicalgroup.org, and our phone number is 706-653-2255.
And again, you appreciate the interaction on the website. If you have a question, you weren't able to talk with us about it today because we didn't take phone calls, go to his website or go to my Facebook page and I'll make sure that he gets it. Dr. Roman, thank you so much. This is a subject near and dear to every family watching us today.
Thank you.
Well, don't you go away. We are talking about TLC's answer to Dance Moms. These are the good moms. It's called Dance Kids Atlanta. We're going to talk about it next. Don't go away.